On a winter morning in South Florida, the sun rises over the Atlantic Ocean. It falls first on the beach hotels, then on the high-rises across Biscayne Bay in downtown Miami, and then spreads out over a broad swath of urban sprawl to fall on a much older landscape, the Everglades. Early Native American inhabitants of the Glades called this subtropical landscape Paheoki, or grassy water. It may look like an endless swamp, but the Everglades is actually a wide, slow-moving river of grass flowing from the Kissimmee River in the north to Florida Bay in the south. It is a mosaic of distinct ecosystems connected by flowing water. These ecosystems are the habitats and food webs for an array of endangered and threatened animals, such as the American alligator, manatee, and roseate spoonbill. They also provide environmental services to Florida residents. The water that percolates down through the peninsula's porous limestone replenishes the Biscayne aquifer, which provides 9 million Floridians with fresh water. Mangrove forests in the southern end provide a buffer for coastal storms. Together with seagrass beds, they extract carbon out of the atmosphere and store it in the soil, mitigating the effects of climate change. And this also supports fisheries that drive Florida's recreation and tourism industries. Yet, more than a century of agriculture and development has diverted this historic flow of water and introduced nutrient pollutants into the ecosystem, threatening the fish, plants, birds, mammals, even the soil itself. Throughout the year, teams of students and scientists from Florida International University in Miami set out from FIU's main campus. These teams are part of the National Science Foundation's long-term ecological research program. This work is part of the decades-long Everglades Restoration Project, the largest ecosystem restoration project in the world, designed to put the Everglades habitats back in balance, accelerated now with historic financial support from Congress and the state of Florida. Student researchers at FIU help guide this multi-billion-dollar, multi-agency program.
Everglades restoration, to me, is such a pivotal project to the future of our state, to the future of our planet. We're really focusing a lot on climate change and the capacity of the Everglades to be a major carbon sink, meaning that it helps to keep carbon out of the atmosphere and hopefully helps to mitigate some of the worst impacts of climate change. But it can only do that if we're effectively conserving it and restoring it through the various projects under the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan.
The Everglades is now about half its original size, but the problems it faces are only getting bigger.
We're detecting salinity in places where we've never detected salinity before. And those days with detectable salinity are increasing from a few days to multiple weeks to a month. That's pretty rapid change for an ecosystem.
It is in everyone's interest that the ecosystem bounces back from its many shocks, and that restoration succeeds so we can recover a healthy, thriving Everglades for plants, animals, and for humans.
Everglades restoration is arguably one of the, if not the most successful ecosystem scale restoration programs ever undertaken in the history of the planet. Collaboration has not only been key to the success, but it's been absolutely necessary from the very beginnings of the restoration program. And Florida International University has been at the center of that science since the very beginning.
The eyes of the world are really on South Florida. Our students and scientists are working as hard as we can to ensure that the restoration project is as effective as possible for the Everglades, South Florida, and the world.
What's the lesson there? When Evelyn Geyser speaks, we all quail down. I love it. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to FIU in Washington, D.C. We're excited to have you here. I'm seeing mostly all new faces, so that's always a treat here at our center in Capitol Hill. We're excited, as you all are, to be partnering with the Everglades Foundation for 3 exciting days of education, advocacy, and definitely some research. For those of you visiting for the first time, welcome. As you'll get to know this afternoon, FIU in Washington, D.C. is here to advocate for our solutions, both as FIU, but also for the greater South Florida and the Miami region. We celebrate our federal collaboration in that space. We're here to celebrate our student success, and we're excited that so many of our students are here with us today, and I see strong showing from our School of Communications. Very nice to see you all. And of course, as we're proving this afternoon, it's about convening power and bringing our partners together. And there's no better example for our mission in Washington in celebrating research, bringing our talent, and also bringing our partners than the Everglades. You'll see it all throughout our facility in what we showcase and a lot of our success and the impact of our research. Quick commercial break. You're more than welcome to walk up to the wall and learn a lot more about our work in the Everglades by clicking our little hub. That'll be later on activity, but but we're also here to celebrate you because as I see stakeholders that are in the audience, when we look at the last 25 years of restoration and our collaboration with FIU, it's because of the collaboration that we see before us. Glad to have you all here. I do want to give a special shout out. We're excited to have Trustee George Heisel, member of the Florida International University Board of Trustees, with us today. Not yet here, but I know we'll see him later. Wes Brooks, former Chief Resilience Officer for the state of Florida, and now at the EPA, will be with us. And I know Catherine Ann Russo, not seeing her just yet, but with the state of Florida's office as well. But it's a great time and exciting time to be part of FIU and our rise in rankings. We're top 50 today and quickly getting to top 35 or top 25. Our research is approaching $330 million. We chuckle, but it is true. We are the home of the Pit Bull Stadium, bringing a little bit of Miami to intercollegiate athletics. But we know that in the policy space and in the collaboration we lead in this town, it's a lot about influence and working with our governmental partners at the state, local, and federal level. And we're excited that ushering in that next chapter is FIU's 7th president, and I'm excited to welcome Jeanette Nunez to the podium.
Thank you, Carlos. And I think he actually increased the challenge that the board has given to me to be top 30. So now apparently I have to be top 25 in the next few years. But the way FIU is doing it, I think we'll get there easily, along with some help from those of you in the audience that are committed to furthering the excellence that FIU shows each and every day. So again, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm so honored to welcome you all to our FIU in DC office. Show of hands, how many of you this is the first time coming to the FIU in DC office? Okay, quite a bit of you have not been here before, so welcome. For those of you that have been here before, of course, welcome back. And just know that this is your home away from home. I can tell you Carlos and his team do phenomenal work, making sure that FIU is well represented throughout DC, and always a thought leader and ensuring that those in the administration, throughout all the different agencies, acknowledge that FIU is showing just a tremendous amount of advocacy and really driving interest in what we do. But it is, of course, where our top talent, including our students, our faculty, our staff, so many that study, that collaborate, that are tackling critical research. As you're viewing this amazing screen and seeing what happens each and every day, it's really where our partners like the Everglades Foundation can conduct business and partner with us, so we're really excited about that. But before I continue, I'd like to acknowledge a very special person in the audience today. We have Steve Sauls, our Vice President Emeritus. Stand up, Steve. Steve is joining us this afternoon. It was actually Steve's vision more than 25 years ago that set us on a course to open an office like this one, and because of his leadership for more than 2 decades, our university has achieved great success in resilience, in medicine, and engineering research. And Steve, I'm sure you can share some more stories. I was on the receiving end of some of that advocacy that you did for many years, but really the legacy of the work that you and so many others did to set FIU on that trajectory for success. Thank you for that, and thank you for being here as well. So as I mentioned, FIU has had a long-standing relationship with the Everglades Foundation, and we're proud of the work that we do together to ensure that we're protecting, restoring, and preserving the Everglades. And Evelyn, thank you for being here. I know you had some flight issues, but we're honored that you would be here along with Paige and John and so many others that have been just an integral part of the work FIU does. The Florida Everglades, as we all know, is an invaluable ecosystem that contains an abundance of habitats, home to many of Florida's landmark species. I joked earlier at lunch that my personal favorite, the panther, of course, those of you that are panthers would agree, but so many wading birds and alligators, so many native species, and all throughout the funding and the strategic action that FIU has taken in partnership will protect Florida's natural resources for generations to come. I've often said it's not simply we're inheriting this a very important treasure from our parents, but we are, of course, borrowing it from our children and our children's children. And I see 2 little ones here in the audience, so know that the work we're doing will have impact for generations to come. And FIU is truly proud to have one of the nation's largest concentrations of scientists and faculty engaged in environmental research, restoration, and education and engagement. We have more than 150 scientists. We spend more than $35 million annually in research funding, specifically around Everglades restoration and environment, and many of that is encompassed within our Institute of Environment, dedicated to protecting our natural resources. And the theme today, Everglades 2050, is more than a vision. I would say that it is a commitment on behalf of the university, a commitment on behalf of the so many members of our faculty, researchers, students, and administration. And over the next 25 years, it is incumbent upon us, it is imperative to invest in these significant conservation efforts. And at FIU, we're doubling down on collaboration and innovation because we realize that future generations want to not only enjoy our natural resources like the Everglades, but we understand it's a way of life for Florida. And oftentimes you get focused on the science of it, the environment, but what I've often said, it's important to recognize that it is integrally linked with our economy, the way of life for Florida. It yields hundreds of millions of dollars on an annual basis in terms of economic impact. So for those that perhaps aren't motivated by the actual science of it, perhaps you'll see it through the lens of the importance to our state's economy, because they are linked. And I think those that do the research can probably speak to that a lot more eloquently than I. And when it comes to research excellence, I can assure you that FIU has 3 core pillars, of which research excellence is one of the ones that I wanted to talk about today. And of those core pillars, as it relates to research excellence, one of our priorities, our strategic areas of focus, is environment and environmental resilience. And so our presence on the Biscayne Bay campus offers us a unique opportunity to monitor and protect our ecosystems. And as I mentioned, that economic engine that is located next to the Everglades. We're obviously doing research in every continent and in every ocean across this globe. So when you think about the impact that FIU has, it goes far beyond what we talk about when we're talking specifically around Florida. But I think that's just part of the beauty of FIU, the impact that we have. We're also at the center of hurricane activity. I dare not mention that we're in hurricane season. I did earlier today. I got in trouble. But as you know, FIU does a lot of work around resilience, a lot of work around ensuring that we are at the cutting edge. Our wall of wind is one of the ones I like to talk about, but really deploying even when you talk about unique assets and when you talk about new technologies, things like sustainable concrete, things like 3D printed seawalls, really exciting things that are happening because of the research we do at FIU. And we are designated by the state of Florida as a university of distinction in environmental resilience. So we're reimagining resilience, and we're investing in research and technologies, as well as harnessing existing tools. So So to achieve that goal, we will be ensuring that BBC, our Biscayne Bay campus, is established as a major research hub and innovation hub for environment and environmental resilience, develop interdisciplinary collaborations and synergy between the Institute of Environment, the Extreme Events Institute, and the Academy for International Disaster Preparedness to build that capacity, to launch new programs, and to launch strategic alliances with partners throughout the industry. And complementing those efforts and investments around technology research to partner with industry, I think, is one of the more important things that we need to focus on, recognizing that there is a whole host of partners that are eager to have ties with FIU, that look at the research we're doing and look at commercializing that research and making sure that it permeates throughout industry. So a lot of exciting things are going on. I know Trustee Heisel, he is fairly new to the board, but I think he's shown a tremendous amount of enthusiasm and passion, so much so he joined us on this trip. We have not disappointed, I hope, in keeping him busy, and tomorrow on our visits in the Hill, we'll get to really deploy that advocacy in action. And so having a trustee come up and spend his time talking to members of Congress, because they are important partners as well. We recognize that it is a commitment that we have as an institution, but of course the state of Florida, along with our partners, our congressional delegation, they have made historic investments. They have partnered with us every step of the way. The state government, the federal government, our congressional delegation has made bold investments supporting a number of key initiatives that have really helped drive our success over the last 25 years. So this has been a long process. We've been involved in this space and research for a long time, and I think our congressional delegation members have recognized the excellence that we've shown and the impact that we're making on research. And at the state level, I can tell you, in my prior role as Lieutenant Governor, the state of Florida invested over $3.5 billion the first term under Governor DeSantis, and up until this point, we are well on the way, the state of Florida, of investing another $3.5 billion. So over the course of the 8 years, that's $8 billion that has been infused into projects that have made a difference around Everglades restoration, water quality, ensuring that we're keeping pace, because oftentimes you hear the challenges with funding, and the Army Corps of Engineers likes to blame the state, and the state likes to blame DEP. But I think all of that has been set aside, and I think what you see is a whole of government approach to investing and strategically investing in Everglades restoration. So we're excited to be able to build on that momentum, and I'm honored to be leading FIU at this really pivotal time. And so thank you all for being here. Thank you for your interest, and I look forward to working with you for years to come. Thank you.
Thanks so much for your remarks, and again, thank you to all our stakeholders for being here. So now I'm going to introduce Todd Crowell. He's the Executive Director of the Institute of Environment, and he'll give you a little bit of an overview about what we're doing here at his school. So Todd, if you'd like to join us.
Thanks very much, Kenny. Can I just talk right here?
Yeah, you can talk.
Yeah, okay. Hey, good afternoon. Thank you all for coming, especially thank you to the Everglades Foundation and the Everglades supporters for the long-time collaborations and all the incredible work you do, and the Miccosukee tribe. FIU has a really long history of working on Everglades basic science, restoration, education. We have a long commitment. I have the pleasure of being the director of the Institute of Environment, but it had its roots 25 years ago in the Southeast Environmental Research Center, which many of you will remember. I'm not sure if our president was born then, but we had a very long collaboration providing the very basic data, fundamental data that you have to understand to rebuild, to put back together an ecosystem like the Everglades, especially with the changing landscape and the ever-growing human population and the demands associated with that. So it's always a moving target. It's a really complicated problem, and we have a long history of doing that. It's been now 20 years ago, and Evelyn was one of the early important scientists in this endeavor, but it was FIU scientists working in the Institute that provided the basic biogeochemistry data that talked about the importance of phosphorus and tipping points and what we had to do to ensure the long-term viability of the Everglades and what we had to do to think about effectively restoring it and protecting it. And it was the Miccosukee tribe and the Everglades Foundation who used their huge social and political and stakeholder power to take our data and implement it into science that matters. And there's probably not a better example of when you talk about the importance of basic science and how that informs us and takes us to the next step than the Everglades phosphorus criteria and the collaboration with the tribe and the foundation and all of the South Florida politicians and stakeholders who came together and said, by golly, we understand what's happening here, and we're going to do what we need to do to protect the Everglades. And so we have this phosphorus criteria, which is an incredible collaboration among all the many stakeholders. And it really does take these big collaborations. What we are really, really good at in the Institute of Environment, as good as anybody in the world, is asking those fundamental questions and collecting that data and information that you have to truly understand a complicated system in an ever-changing landscape. But without the partnerships with people like the Everglades Foundation, the Miccosukee Tribe of Indians, the politicians from South Florida, we don't go very far with that information, right? So you need the people who collect the data, ask the right questions, and then you need the messengers and the people that really have that drive and will to affect policy. And I think that's one of the things we have to celebrate here today, and one of the things we have to pay particular attention to as we move forward. So I'm always thankful to be here. Carlos keeps inviting me back, and I'm always happy when my phone rings and I get the invitations to come up here. One of the culminations, I think, of the long history of collaboration with FIU, the Miccosukee Tribe of Indians, the Everglades Foundation, of course, was the Florida Coastal Everglades long-term ecological research program. I had the distinct privilege of running the long-term ecological research program for the country. I worked for the National Science Foundation way back when, and so I got to run the entire network for the United States, and that was a pleasure, and I learned an awful lot. So it was really great to end up getting hired by FIU and being able to be part of the FCE. But the FCE has been a critical place. It is one of the major programs for FIU and certainly for the Institute of Environment, and so no better person for me to introduce to talk about it than the lead principal investigator, Dr. John Kamenowski.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you, FIU DC. Thank you, Everglades Foundation, Miccosukee Tribe. Thank you to our students, our 4 Everglades Fellows. If you're a 4 Everglades Fellow, current or former, could you please stand? And if you could stay standing, you are an Everglades, if you're an FCE alum or an FIU alum, could you please stand? Wow. Wonderful. All right. Thank you. Many of the people here today understand the importance of the Everglades. We understand a lot of the challenges that lie ahead. We want to reflect on some of the things that we've done well, and we want to capitalize on things that we need to be maybe doing differently and more efficiently. So I'm the lead principal investigator of the Florida Coastal Everglades LTR, and Evelyn Geiser was before me for 14 years or 15 years, the lead PI. In 2000, or even prior to 2000, the Everglades Foundation sounded the alarm, and FIU answered the call. We've been partners trying to understand the mechanisms that entangle and reconnect the Everglades. I've come to FIU 13 years ago, and I've had the honor and the humbling challenge to really try to understand this complex mosaic. And it is a social ecological fabric, and it is the economy of the state, and it is an international gem. So I want to talk today a little bit about some of the things that we've been able to discover because of these partnerships. So those students and alumni who just stood up, many of them were supported through the 4 Everglades Fellowships or through partnerships with other state, federal agencies and with the Miccosukee Tribe's assistance. we've been advancing ecological discoveries, and I want to tell you about a few of those. So in the very beginning of setting up the federal nutrient criterion, Evelyn Geiser was part of that effort, leading an understanding of the ecological thresholds. So the Everglades, as we know, is extremely phosphorus limited, but we didn't know just how quite phosphorus limited it was. And it wasn't until Evelyn's work with this flume project, where they were adding phosphorus continuously in Northeast Shark River Slough, that they were able to sort of titrate the amount of phosphorus that that system would stay intact under or fall apart and dissolve. And so Evelyn was leading that effort and set those thresholds that now we use in the Everglades restoration efforts and evaluating what 10 parts per billion looks like on the landscape and where that can be absorbed and where it doesn't get absorbed very well. Some of the other things that we've been learning have been related to storms. So hurricanes are kind of scary, right? And in 2005, that was a very busy hurricane season. 2017 was another extremely busy hurricane season. We learned different things from both hurricane seasons. So if those that you remember in 2005, Hurricane Wilma, it appeared to be as similar as Hurricane Irma and where it hit Cape Romano in southwest Florida. The impacts that we documented were quite different in FCE. So we have these sites along the Shark River Slough and into the mangroves and into the Gulf. And that is a subsidy of nutrients to those ecosystems. We learned in Hurricane Wilma that we gain elevation when we have storms. We learned in Hurricane Wilma that we lose elevation when there's vulnerability to those storms. I want to explain why this matters. So Meenakshi Chaba, who's here, who's at the Everglades Foundation, has done economic evaluation research, and I think this was from your master's work, that quantified that these mangroves are upwards of $3 billion in economic value. Not only are they beautiful, they are valuable to the state of Florida and to the world. So restoration has been reconnecting a lot of these systems with fresh water. So we've seen in areas that would dry for 3 months out of the year that we're getting 365 days of wetlands, water on wetlands. And this matters because it means that these ecosystems can begin to connect again. So most of the Everglades became disconnected long before we understood the consequences of it. And now, because we're monitoring the effects of restoration, we can tell management what we're seeing in the landscape, because we use these networks of long-term data that we're feeding into Congress every 2 years. So I'll talk a little bit more about that. And I don't know that Shelby Service is in the room. Thank you, Shelby. Shelby was a student of mine, now works for NOAA, and she was looking at the effects of saltwater intrusion and the consequences of delayed restoration. And Shelby and I hypothesized, it's going to be the soil microbes that are going to accelerate from this saltwater intrusion and cause carbon loss. And in fact, it was much simpler. It was that plants got stressed, lost their root mass, and the soils collapsed. And we fed that information back to the national academies, and they were able to inform us that was, or inform Everglades restoration that needed to be part of policy. So Everglades restoration wasn't intending to mitigate saltwater intrusion, but because of our students' research, it now is. In many cases, we are meeting the federal nutrient criterion. This is Tamiami Trail bridging. A lot of the water that's coming into the Northeast Shark River Slough is meeting the 10 parts per billion. We know the areas where it's not and where we need to double down and do better. And so this effort is ongoing, but it is a success. We've also educated many students. So in our program alone, we've had 150 graduate students, masters and PhDs, many of whom have gone on to lead scientific careers. We have educated more than 10,000 public school students in Miami-Dade County. We train teachers. We are educating the next generation of scientists. We are trying to develop that moving forward because it is critical. Many of the students that graduate from FIU stay in South Florida. They need to be able to live in an economy that is sustainable, that's based on the Everglades. And we get to train them to do that. We're also protecting many vulnerable and iconic species. So the Florida panther, The Path of the Panther, if you haven't seen it, it's a wonderful documentary, and it is a success story. The American alligator has recovered because of restoration efforts. We are seeing the Florida flamingo, which we didn't think was a native Floridian, and it is. And research has shown genetically that it is. It's returning. Wading bird populations are returning, but we're sort of needing to also figure out how not to reduce or impact negatively the tree islands that the Miccosukee, for example, have their ancestors are buried in those tree islands. So there's a deep connection to understanding the balance between nature and culture. We benefit from Everglades restoration. 1 in 3 Floridians drinks water from the Everglades. And it is a fragile, beautiful resource that we have in plentitude, but often it's being compromised. And so we need to protect it. It is, without drinking water in South Florida, we don't have a strong economy, we don't have valuable real estate, and we're tying those connections to those aspects of the economy very, very deliberately. I want to end on an emphasis of the value that we could bring to continuing Everglades restoration science. We have a trove of data, over 220 comprehensive data sets that really are publicly accessible. They're probably underutilized in their value because we can reuse them in many ways. We've published on them and we've published them, but they do go into informing every 2 years the comprehensive, the CISRIP report, the Committee of the Independent Scientific Review of Everglades Restoration Effectiveness. But we need to harmonize those data, and technology is at our door enabling us to do this. And the Everglades Long-Term Ecological Research Program has the capacity and the large-scale data sets to really feed a lot of that synthesis moving forward. And I want to just show you this illustration. This map might not mean so much for somebody who doesn't study atmospheric chemistry, but it is an extremely comprehensive and rare network of atmospheric towers that we have in the Everglades. So we have them in every ecosystem type: marshes, ecotonal marshes and mangroves, scrub mangroves, these really productive mangrove forests in Shark River, and even in seagrass meadows of Florida Bay. And they are continuously monitoring every 15 minutes different aspects of carbon, energy, and temperature. And they're really important for understanding the way that this system, this landscape is changing, and how we manage water can influence how much carbon this system stores, which feeds the system and feeds the ecology and the economy of the Everglades. So part of the benefit of our long-term data is that it can cross-connect, and it's very powerful and needs to be utilized to a higher extent. So at this stage, I want to have this be, we have a panel of folks. I didn't have the microphone to actually have audience interaction questions, which was okay, but I think we need to integrate it into the panel. So I was told to say this was my last question so that the panel seating could be arranged. But
does the audience have any questions for Todd or John or
President?
I see other universities there.
Yeah.
We don't like to talk about them, but could you talk about our collaborations that...
So in our research program, we have more than 35 affiliates, institutional affiliates, so FIU plus. And so the University of Alabama is an affiliate with these marsh and mangrove towers in the Everglades, but they're one of 35. Ameriflux is the network with which this whole data stream is interacting, but the importance of inter-academic collaboration, inter-institutional collaborations is that we can bring in experts. That we have a lot of expertise, but some institutions have different expertise. And so part of that collaboration is to enhance interdisciplinarity. So part of the collaboration is also federal and state agencies. So when I mentioned Shelby's work, that was a collaboration with the Everglades Foundation, with the Park Service, with South Florida Water Management District, and everybody was eager to understand the questions because we had a common objective that we needed to meet. How can we keep soil from collapsing with saltwater intrusion? Thank you. Sure. Sorry that I didn't have the microphone to give folks, but we can,
No worries.
deal with it.
Well, thank you so much for that. It's great to hear from John and Todd, the scientists. I studied political science, so just overwhelming amount of knowledge for us there and so informative. So now I'd like to introduce the panel here. That'll be having a discussion. So moderating it will be Rita. I don't want to butcher it. Gonna do my best here. Teutonico. Save the trouble. I don't want to be in trouble with that one. We'll also be having Stephanie Johnson from the National Academy of Sciences. And Rita is actually part of our FIU team here. And then we'll be having Meenakshi Shaba from the Everglades Foundation, Curtis Osceola from the Miccosukee Tribe, and Paige Kleindell, who is one of our 4 Everglades Fellows at FIU and with the foundation. So please join us up here and let's have a nice discussion.
Thanks, Kenny. I told him he could just call me Dr. T. That would be easier. But anyway, so thanks for the introduction. I'm really glad that we had that. And John, thank you for mentioning data transparency, because that was one of the things that we know that Congressman Diaz-Balard's office is really interested in pursuing, and we're going to have that, maybe a discussion of that after the panel. So yes, I'm the Dean of Research for the College of Arts and Sciences at Florida International University, and as the President mentioned, the Institute of Environment and Environmental Resilience is one of our pillars, so is a big part of the portfolio that I am able to help people secure funding for, and hopefully moving forward we'll be able to do that as well. So I have a couple of questions to get the discussion going, and then we'll open it up to folks from the audience. And so I guess my first question they wanted us to ask, and I'll call you out. The first, you don't have to all answer every question, but the first one I think probably they just wanted us to ask, so 25 years of restoration, if you could sum up in, a couple of minutes, how are we doing? And I know that's a loaded question. You could probably answer that for like an hour each, but you're... Couple of questions. I'll start with the Meenakshi.
Okay. So, yes. So, I think I speak for all of us here, researchers, practitioners over here, that we've made some remarkable progress in restoration in these past years. And John, spoke about all the research that we've done, especially in the AGs of FIU, FCE, LTER, that has brought about so much scientific information for us to have a very strong foundation to practice the Everglades restoration upon. So great progress, a whole lot more to go. So we're not stopping, and therefore that is why it's important to keep restoration going, would be my very summed up answer.
I agree with what you said, but no, I really do think as a student that's a part of the FCE LTER, I get to work alongside a lot of the scientists that are conducting this research, and I would agree that we are making great progress. Our goal was to help increase freshwater flow into the Everglades, to reconnect the Everglades, and that's what we are doing, especially right now, is we're helping remove the barrier along Tamiami Trail and allow water back into the Everglades. And some of the data that we've collected, a part of our different long-term monitoring data sets, have shown this, especially in the northeast region of the Everglades. We're seeing deeper waters for longer periods of time during the year. And so this is one of our goals, but again, we still have a long way to go, and we're still hoping to have even more fresh water entering into the Everglades and flushing out into Florida Bay to really help mitigate the sea level rise and saltwater intrusion. And some of our research also, as we are restoring the Everglades, as we're adding more water in, we're also now seeing some mobilization of legacy phosphorus. And so there's always new challenges that come with restoration implementation, and so that's why we're here with the Everglades Foundation, with the FCE, LTER, with the policymakers, the stakeholders. We're all working together, conducting transdisciplinary research to really work towards answering these complex questions and adapting our management as we are working towards our goals, but also there are new problems that we have to face.
Stephanie?
So the National Academies has been working on biennial reviews of natural system restoration progress. So not just constructing things, but actually what's the benefit to the ecosystem for now over 20 years. And in the early years, we would produce these reports that like, well, there's not a lot going on. You know, we're trying, but there's a lot of procedure to work through, a lot of things to plan. But in the past two reports, 2022, 2024, there's just strong praise for the pace of implementation. Budgets have been at historic levels. There's a lot changing. But also, Paige noted that there are some huge benefits coming through, particularly in Northeast Shark River Slough, through some of the early investments in mod waters, recent investments in a seepage barrier along the eastern side that are allowing water levels to increase. And so the committee is not only, you know, they want to highlight the progress where it is occurring, but the committee has also noted that sometimes it's hard to find the progress. Sometimes the monitoring data are kind of buried and it's hard to see what are we supposed to be expecting. So there's some great successes. There's some challenges as well.
And your new report comes out in 2026, right? September?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
that'll be exciting.
So the tribe has the unique experience of having lived in the Florida Everglades predating colonization. And the reason why Everglades restoration is even a concept is because what first happened was Everglades destruction and degradation. So there was a massive effort to drain it that we all are aware of. Some of us maybe aren't aware of the deliberate effort to drain the glades. But that's where it started, is, you know, the hubris and the error of, you know, the American government to try and destroy one of the country's greatest treasures. Inadvertently so. I mean, they were thinking, you know, we're going to develop this area. We'll have big airports. We'll have a lot of residents. And the economy of Florida is going to boom. But what they soon realized is that, you know, these aquifers existed. The science of hydrology evolved, and now we recognize that this water table that sits below the surface is actually supported by the wetlands above it. And so that's when it became essential to restore the Everglades, is when that insight developed. And the tribe has been saying the whole time, in a not scientifically, but in sort of a holistic, you know, on the ground view of the world, saying, you know, cutting canals through this beautiful you know, landscape, you know, our mother, as we refer to it, is a bad idea. What we're doing is destroying it. And I think that there was a what's the word? There was an enlightenment in the scientific community that, you know, this was a really bad mistake and that we have to restore. Then we talked about, you know, the growing pains, right, of the first 20 years, really, the first 18 or so years, I think, of Everglades restoration, where there's, you know, a ton of research being done, a ton of observation being done, and just trying to understand how are we going to tackle this incredible project that is the largest in the world and that's never been tried before. And so I think as the tribe looks back, you know, we kind of have this understanding that, you know, the the scientific community needed to do that part to understand what we already, kind of knew intrinsically, which is that we need to restore it to this natural flow. We need to restore it to the way that, what our ancestors say, the way that the Creator intended. And, the success that we've seen over the last few years, I think, is because of that enlightenment, because of the time that was taken and the attention that was taken by the scientific community to really take note and understand what it is that the Everglades brings to the state, not just economically, but in terms of a strategic resource as fresh water. So what I see, what the tribe sees now, and what we feel is a level of optimism and a number of steps in the right direction. But we still have our eye on the horizon to full restoration and to removing all the cuts across its face, so that we can have true sheet flow and true hydrologic integrity, instead of compartmentalization of a very important and key system to our way of life, but also to the way of life of millions of others now.
Right. Yeah, thank you very much for your insights, and I think that's the way you symbolize that is really touching, and really makes this really is a value even more so of what we're trying to accomplish. Not we, just us, we, like the whole we. So I think one of the other things we wanted to talk about a little bit is that, and I think John mentioned it, our president mentioned it, and Todd as well, like we really want to have impact of our science, right? And so if you maybe could give a couple of your ideas about, how can we accelerate the pace of actually making our science that we're doing really have more impact. I mean, it's having impact, and I think but we really feel like an urgency. And if you had any suggestions of ways that some of these convenings, I think obviously are a great idea, but are there ways we could accelerate the actionableness of our science to implementing policies and restoration?
So if I could go ahead, and I would say we've already achieved part of it, and that lies in this panel, which is so diverse, right? You have an academic institution, you have a nonprofit, you have another nonprofit, but at the national level, and you have a tribal presence over here. All of us are part of a collaboration, and this has begun, and that's one of the achievements of restoration itself, right? So that we are here, we've started to collaborate with each other, and in making and producing knowledge and helping it get on the ground, and as well as succeed in that way, because we can do it together. So that's one part of my answer, and that the same collaboration or research partnerships, I would say we need to double down on, and I speak of that as a social scientist that who was at one time an ecologist. So ecologists and social scientists, especially economists, need to work together in partnerships that can take the ecological scientific results and translate them into a language that people as well as policymakers can understand. Now, it just doesn't mean that economic values, but it means a lot more other benefits that restoration is providing to us. So we all know that Everglades restoration is for environmental reasons. Check mark. Everglades restoration is for ethical reasons. Check mark. But Everglades restoration is for our economic reasons and our quality of life, our well-being. All of it is predicated on an Everglades that's healthy, right? So that understanding needs to come to people, to communities in Florida as well as beyond Florida, because it's not just Florida's Everglades, as somebody was saying to me this afternoon, it's America's Everglades, right? So we need to do that, and I think social scientists like me and ecologists all among you, we need to sit together and see how we can translate those benefits. Already, Everglades, the fresh water it produces, so is a part of, on that fresh water is associated with an amalgamation of industries, which we call the clean water economy, which contributes $330 billion to the GDP and supports 3 million jobs in the region. right? So I'm very delighted to share with you just a teaser that Everglades Foundation has collaborated with Earth Economics to find the value of ecosystem services provided by the Everglades. Tomorrow will be the unveiling of the value, but we'll talk about how we have monetarily valued this, ecosystem services like hazard mitigation, how freshwater wetlands give you flood protection, and so do coastal wetlands. How is it part of our real estate economy that we all depend on, directly or indirectly? How it really supports recreation. Very obvious, but by how much? We can quantify that. And not just this, it is about how do Everglades ecosystems affect our health, mental health, as well as physical well-being. So all these are benefits we derive from the Everglades, and yet we don't know about them. We can talk about them, but I can't tell you a quantified value, and that is my frustration as a scientist, as well as the fact that we have long ways to go. We have to work together, collaborate, and do deep diving on these so that we can affect and impact restoration that way. Because, as more and more of us understand that value, the more will policymakers be making sure that that restoration doesn't halt. It just accelerates and moves on to its destination.
Tuned for tomorrow.
Tuned for tomorrow.
Paige, do you have a comment?
Yeah, so I've had the unique opportunity for my research assistantship at FIU. I get to help administer the South Florida Caribbean Cooperative Ecosystem Studies Unit, which is the CESU, and this is a really important organization, a federal organization that links the federal agencies that are funding the large grants and the projects in the Everglades with the institutions and organizations that are conducting that research. And so in this ground of collaboration and science sharing, it's been a space where we've been able to bring our science directly to the federal agencies that are funding that research and really helping bridge that gap. It provides this platform for us to have these stronger organizational relationships. And so being able to bring the science as quickly as possible, as soon as possible, create those collaborations day one. And as a graduate student with this organization, I've been really trying to help get other graduate students a part of engaged with this, because a lot of people don't know about it. And so it's helping these graduate students become more aware of those federal agencies that are funding their research, providing them opportunities to then present their research directly to those organizations. We have an Greater Everglades Ecosystem Restoration Conference where we're able to present our research not just to academics but also to the managers. South Florida Water Management District. This is a space where our organization, the CESU, was able to have a student-led session where we were able to have graduate students share their dissertation and theses research. And so from this, I really think that one way that we can, what was the question? Sorry. Yeah, accelerate the impact is really give other students who are early career scientists the same opportunities that I have today, the opportunity to come to these panels, as we're studying for our PhDs and our master's degrees, we're learning a lot about the scientific process. We're really honing in our own craft. And so we know a lot about what we need to do, but we're also told that, oh, hey, we have all of these important broader impacts. Like, how is our research actually impacting these other areas of the research, the economic side, the social side, even like agriculture, business, the policy side. And so having a place for early career scientists to step in right away, have conversations, come to things like these, and meet the people that are going to be looking at their research in the future and that are going to be implementing their science into policy, into management. And then you're training them at a young age so that they are not only professionals in the field that they're studying in, but now they can also communicate effectively with those that they're going to be working with throughout the rest of their career.
Sure, Carlos is very happy to hear you say that. So it's, it's part of our goals here. So, Stephanie?
So we're at a time right now in Everglades restoration where science is more important than ever. And that is because we're kind of at this pivot between a lot of planning and construction and then the management of those projects. So we're still planning a lot of really big, important studies, the Biscayne Bay, Southern Everglades ecosystem projects, Southern Everglades coming to, like, how much water can we feed to Florida Bay and how do you get it there? Those are really important questions. Meanwhile, you've got projects that are operating, and is it working as you intended? What is the monitoring showing? How is the impact? There's a lot of science that needs to be done to support this. So, and if you put a lot of smart scientists in a room, they can come up with 100 other questions that they think are critical. So a way to expedite science in support of restoration, the National Academies has said, is there's a need for an integrated kind of a multi-agency science plan, so that they work with managers on what are the key questions that are needed to inform decision making, and what are the highest priorities, so that collectively we can all come together to pool limited resources on the most important decision relevant questions. And some of that may be like monitoring, synthesis, new models to understand peat accretion in the Southern Everglades. There's some really important questions, and often sometimes science needs come up right in the midst of planning, where you're like, oh, we're doing this project now, we need this new model. Well, we should have thought of that like 6 years ago. And so then the tools aren't available. There's a real need to like think towards the long term. And right now the staff is so burdened by the daily tasks that they don't have enough time in their requirements to really be able to have that vision. So the committee, 2022 recommended this Everglades science plan. Committee was super excited, kind of landed like a dud, but because it takes some work. But the committee thinks that work is really valuable, because then you collectively can say to potential funders, you can go out to other agencies to say, we as a group of scientists think this is really important and critical to the long-term success, not just planning a project. So, echo everything everyone just said, and I'll add two things. I think I'll call back, what Todd said at the very beginning, which was that, involving stakeholders from an early stage, getting them out in the field, getting them to see the work, to see the landscape, to see the wildlife, getting the electorate to be involved. Like Mikasuki's been doing tourism in the Glades for decades, but it hasn't really been as appealing as maybe we would have hoped until recently. Everyone's kind of like, oh my God, we have this beautiful treasure, in the Everglades. And so, getting individuals involved and getting stakeholders involved and decision makers involved early and in that work process, just to see how difficult and time consuming it is from an early stage, I think is really important. And the second thing I'll add is, in the last 3 years, during my time, the last 3.5 years, during my time with the tribe as an executive, what I've seen is that when the tribe steps up and leverages its sovereignty, that a lot of parts move at the federal level and at the state level, and I think there is a lot of untapped momentum that the tribes still have when it comes to Everglades restoration. And so, these partnerships and collaborations are so important between the tribes and, each of the stakeholders, local, state, federal, the science community, the academic community, that synergy that we have and that we bring to deep places like DC and Tallahassee, that comes from, that collaborative spirit. And the way that the tribe can contribute is leverage its sovereignty. And so invite us to do that. Keep bringing us to the table, and we will continue to leverage sovereignty for the benefit of, our home.
That's great. Yeah, I think the whole partnerships, that's one of my core beliefs and things I try to accelerate here, and I think that you just highlighted so many of the things that make that really so valuable. So my last question, then I'll open it up to the audience, and so we've talked a lot about what we've done in the past, and this might be hard to answer, but if there was like one project, like top of mind, a project or a science area that you think would be most critical for us to be looking at now to help the success for the next 25 years, but what's something that you think is an area or a project that you think would be really pivotal for us to be considering doing right now? Maybe I'll start with Stephanie, because we talked about this a little bit before we started.
Yeah, so these are huge investments that are being made in the Everglades, and we want them to last for a long time. Yet we all know climate is changing, sea level is changing. So how do you build a restoration project or program that lasts and is sustainable or can help the ecosystem transition? So the project I wanted to emphasize, the committee has emphasized repeatedly, is the need for incorporating rigorous climate change research into planning. And so the agencies are required to look at sea level. They're not required to look at precipitation. And yet the tools have developed to the point that they are available to use alternative scenarios for like drier times, wetter times, more intense times. There's lots of scenarios one could pick that doesn't have to be perfect. You test the resilience of the ecosystem so that you ensure that your investments are likely to last under future conditions. Likewise, really building models to understand these changes like peat collapse or understand sea level rise and sedimentation. So if you spend billions of dollars on the southeast Everglades, that you know you're getting the benefits that you intend to get. So there's a lot more research that can be done.
That's great. Curtis, did you want to go second?
Sure. I was thinking about what to say, because there's so many things you could pay attention to. I know that the tribe has emphasized Western Everglades restoration, and that we're talking about a part of the wetland that's the size of Rhode Island that is really the keystone to a bunch of other parts. But we just came out of a period of record spending in the Everglades from an administration that I think was the most involved directly in Everglades restoration. And now we have a new administration. And so we have to, again, and I think that's why we're all here, right, is to talk to Congress, to talk to the administration, and let them know this is not a partisan thing. This is there's economic, there's strategic benefits, there's sovereign benefits to the tribes and to the state of Florida in terms of how it protects its citizens. And I think that taking a step back, going like 30,000 feet, Everglades restoration is a story of restoration. It is the flagship story of restoration on the face of the earth. And so we have to remember to praise it, to evangelize it, and to teach lawmakers and decision makers, administrators, no matter what their affiliations are, about how important this single project is. When you get into the nitty-gritty, I shouldn't say that. When you get into those offices in Congress and you talk to the staffers and you talk to the committee members and the committee staff, they're like, why is the Everglades so special? Why does it get hundreds of billions of dollars every year? And I have my little $200,000 project that I can't get funded, or my community needs. And you have to know the answer to that. And the answer is because the success of Everglades restoration is the success of restoration science as a whole. And we have to win. We have to be right. Because if we're not, I think that we're going to be set back for a very, very long time. And so really supporting the brand that is Everglades restoration and sharing the message that this is working and really where we've gotten today, through these collaborations, I think we're at a really interesting moment dealing with an administration and a Congress that's talking about heavy cuts to government spending and about heavy cuts to administrative spending. We're in a unique moment where are we going to be heard? Yes. Will they listen to us? I mean, that depends on how well we brand this thing and how important we make it. And I think, the Everglades Foundation is doing a great job of really adding an economic component to this, because this is billions and billions of dollars in fisheries, in water, in real estate value. I mean, we are talking about the future of Florida and the future of the Southeast, and in some respect, and a huge impact on the gross domestic product of the United States. So getting those points through, being consistent, and pushing the brand of Everglades restoration, I think, is really important.
Great, thank you. Paige, did you have an idea? I'll get Meenakshi can end our panel.
Yeah. So one data set that comes to mind, I'm a part of Dr. Evelyn Geiser's lab, and we work on monitoring we have a monitoring project that is a part of monitoring the comprehensive Everglades restoration plan. And so this has been going on for about 20 years. And so this is a very expansive data set. It spans the water conservation areas into Everglades National Park. There's over 150 different sites. And we sample for numerous different things, all the way from the algae, which is my favorite, and we study in my lab. But we also look at water chemistry, water depth. We look at the plant communities, invertebrates, fish, and so this is truly a comprehensive data set that we've been working with for the past 20 years. And this data set contains so much because we've been able to really observe changes all throughout the Everglades as restoration was getting started, as restoration is now occurring. And so this is a really important data set to continue doing because it's already so long term. It's such an invaluable data set where we're able to just look at our samples and say, how are things changing? We heard a lot about disturbances, and we've seen effects of different disturbances over time. And now we're seeing more of these restoration projects being completed, so we're hoping to see more and more effects of restoration in this data set. And again, another plug for my lab, the algae, specifically the diatoms, we use them as bioindicators. So each species has a very specific environmental threshold that it prefers, and so depending on how many different species are there, what species are present, what their abundances are, we're able to know the health of these different areas. And something that's really great about these diatoms is that they respond very quickly to changes, and so they're kind of our little canaries in a coal mine that can tell us exactly where changes are happening and help us just see it. What is it effects of just natural interannual variation? Is it effects of a strong disturbance that went through, or is it effects of our restoration efforts? So my hope is that we're really able to continue doing this monitoring project and thinking about Everglades 2050, like how amazing would it be to have almost 50 years worth of data that we can again reflect on, that's helping build up, like Curtis said, this baseline, this foundation of restoration ecology, helping us really understand holistically what's going on in the Everglades.
Great, thanks. And Meenakshi, one thing top of mind for you.
Several, but I will stick to a few. There is no. Okay, yeah, it's the batteries going off, I think. There are several things to come to mind, but I have to reiterate that this FCE LTER's data is the shoulder on which all my research, all research stands on, and restoration is predicated on that. And I can't help but underscore the importance of science that FIU has helped to bring us over here. At the foundation, I have learned how to translate that into powerful policy through economics. Again, the basics of which I learned at FIU. And you're right that the economic data that we generate in the report that's forthcoming and the one before, all of them, and that's my answer to this question, is that we have to make sure that they all lead to this point that we have to keep our eyes focused on completing restoration and completing it on time. Of course, with a few caveats, which Stephanie mentioned, which Curtis mentioned, by science that is robust, that's with collaboration that is equitable and meaningful for all stakeholders. We can't compromise, and yet we have to make sure that we stay on this accelerated path. What we need for that is sustained and increased investment. We've already seen that recent increases in investment have paid huge dividends already, some of which you all spoke about, as example, the Northeast Shark River Slough. So those tangible benefits give us confidence that restoration can proceed. One of the biggest projects is the Everglades Agricultural Reservoir, which, if you might not have heard of it, it's just south of Lake Okeechobee, and it's the reservoir, which has just begun construction, along with its constructed wetland, is as big as the size of Manhattan. Last month, just a couple of weeks back, I had the opportunity to visit it, and I was I talk about it all the time, and I was so naive to think that I'll see a dug-up reservoir at one go. But of course not. I'm visiting like a city. How could that possibly be? I visited the C-43 reservoir, which is close to completion, and it is a huge accomplishment for Everglades restoration. What these are doing is storing water that's badly needed in the region, as for the ecosystems as well as people. What we need to draw upon again is Everglades restoration is not an ecosystem restoration project, if that's what you thought while coming into this meeting. It's a resilience builder for South Florida and for the country. It's a water supply system. It is mitigating hazards. It is providing for economy, our livelihoods, our identities. So we need to make sure that we keep our eyes focused as we move on to 2030 or soon enough to complete restoration on time. Thank you.
So, did we have questions from the audience? This is my New York voice. Any questions from the audience? Thanks. Can you say who you are, if you don't mind?
Yes. Good afternoon. First of all, I want to thank you all for coming out and speaking to us. I found everything very insightful. Now, my question is, in conversations with policymakers, especially during such a fiscally conservative time, how do you drive home the urgency and mission of Everglades restoration in a way that cuts through budget concerns and makes it clear that this is more of a national priority?
I made this point a little earlier, which is, leveraging sovereignty, at least for the tribes, right? When we have our visits, the thing that we emphasize is that these are our homelands, and we have an interest not in them financially, but we have an interest that's cultural. And so Congress has a trust responsibility to the tribes to make sure that our home and our places of worship and our sacred lands are sustained. And so for us, this is about the free exercise of religion. This is about, the Congress's trust responsibility to the tribes themselves to support their sovereignty and to fulfill the promises that they made after they, have broken so many to tribes around the country. So that's how we approach it from our perspective. And I think in tandem with, the scientific approach has to be an economic argument. And I think that's kind of where we all, are gearing up to, we're all sort of being led to with this administration so that we can speak the right language to the right people. You know, sometimes you have your ideas, you have your passion, you have your moral argument, you have your compass arguments, you have your scientific arguments, but people are gonna not listen. It's gonna fall on deaf ears sometimes. And so when you're dealing with policymakers, you have to know what their interests are, what their committee assignments are, what they're going to care about. And, you know, Everglades doesn't really impact the Ohio River Valley, but ecosystem restoration does, because, you know, they're tired of pulling, you know, motor oil out of the Ohio. And so, you know, teaching them how to do that and getting them to understand that, you know, Everglades success is going to, you know, that ecosystem restoration science is going to be applicable to a number of different areas, and, you know, can restore fisheries, can restore oyster fields, can restore, you know, mussel patches. You know, I mean, there's just so many applications of ecosystem restoration. And so finding that economic argument, I think where the scientific and moral arguments don't apply, is helpful. But specifically for the tribe, I'd say leveraging our sovereignty and the promises of Congress to the tribes.
Steve Saul, would you like to ask a question?
Good question. Here you go, Steve. And I have a partial answer, and then I'll have a question. So everything that's been said is good. This is amazing group of people here. The knowledge in this room is incredible. It gives me hope and encouragement about the future. Now, I've been involved in the Everglades my entire life with various ways, but including the Save Our Everglades program, saving the Florida planters, purchasing Fakahatchee Strand. And I was involved in the grassroots coalition to save Biscayne Bay, and my contribution was to bring in Dr. Crowell, bring in FIU, bring in science. Now, the hardest thing to do, because lots of things can be priorities, but to be the priority you want it to be, you have to build coalitions. You have to spread the word. You have to communicate to a big audience so they emotionally feel what you feel about your homeland. So people feel that we got to save it. It's essential. It's critical. But we have to do that by communicating and building coalition. And that can take many forms, from involving our journalism students, communication, word of mouth, social media, but it's a constant thing, because you're not just trying to put one story out, you're trying to change hearts and minds so that the politicians say, oh, we got to do something about this. And one good thing about it is there needs to be urgency and commitment, short-term action, long-term. And so part of the good news about the Bay, which I now know more about than I used to know about the Everglades, is there are solutions. Some of them can be done, are being done now, and some of them will take a while, like getting everybody off the failed septic tank systems. It's doable, but part of the answer is how in a conservative climate, because the Everglades has enjoyed bipartisan support. But to sustain that, we have to, for the next generation, we have to continue to let people understand in their own way that that's important. And so we were just having a little side conversation. Maybe ecotourism is one solution, one partial answer. But you have created the science of understanding the Everglades beyond many people's wildest expectations. So my hat's off to you and the leadership and the thought process that went through that. And we can all do that. My question is, we've been measuring sea level rise in the Keys since about 1900, okay? It's not a new thing, okay? But now there's some concern about the inundation of the Everglades from the west. So can anyone speak to that and how we address that? That's a hard question, forgive me, but
So the tribe has been working in tandem with the Park Service and with other stakeholders to identify really vital projects. are really important project components as part of the Western Everglades Restoration Project. And it is a huge project. It would be the largest SERP project, but what it would do is if we rehydrate the Western Glades, Lossman Slough, Taylor Slough, and the Sweetwater Strand, what we start to see is a movement of organic matter out toward the coastline, and restoration of things like Cape Sable and the coastlines near it. That's the theory. That's the working theory, because really that land has been deprived of water for various reasons. One of them, being single species management of the Cape Sable seaside sparrow. But aside from that, for us, what we see is a way to stop the flooding of tribal lands and the destruction of tree islands. But there is a trickle-down effect in places like Cape Sable and the surrounding coastlines. And so we expect that to be an ancillary benefit to Western Everglades restoration.
And if I may add, there's a similar project, which is a SERP restoration project, which is called the Biscayne Bay Southeastern Everglades Restoration Projects for the southeast part of the peninsula. And the same, theory applies that if we rehydrate the southeast wetlands, because they too have been, dehydrated, so without moving too many pieces, the water that we have to the north in the region that can be redirected to the southeastern region and rehydrate those wetlands, so that what happens is as fresh water comes in, it gives the movement of organic matter, as Curtis said, and also through the tidal action, and whatever sediments are trapped, coastal ecosystems like mangroves and coastal marshes, they're able to take those sediments, hold them on tight with their roots, and collect that soil. That's called soil accretion, or land building. Vertical land building happens in this magical process of freshwater flows being reinstated. So the same principle works. That project is in planning, and there are many other experimental projects happening under the district's plan, such as the mangrove elevation. I forget MEME every time, or Mimi. What do you call it? So mangrove elevation projects, right? So what you do is same. You take those test areas and measure experimentally, find out how much water is needed where, so that you can make sure that sediment accretion, that is land building, occurs. That is another way that in fact, that is one of the first projects where restoration is figuring out how climate change is affecting through modeling. As the National Academies of Science pointed out, we've used only sediment accretion models until now. We need dynamic models which will take in the factor of time, how it affects the accretion. So we find out, we're making that sign, that progress is happening. And I think that is one of the stellar projects that will help us build resilience. Remember, folks, it's the resilience of the region for the ecosystems as well as people. We're going to hold on to our land because of restoration. Very foundational.
I just want to jump in. Another angle on this is relates to the FIU's work in peak collapse, which is incredibly important, because not only do you need fresh water to continue accretion to help mitigate against sea level rise, you also want to have a system that as sea level rises, you can slowly transition those ecosystems so there's no sudden collapse. Well, you have to understand peak collapse. Peak collapse can take away like a foot or more of soil kind of very quickly. And so in order to help the mangroves transition in, you want to understand what kind of hydrology you need to support that system and make it last as long as possible. So that's part of the climate research that's needed.
Thank you. So I think we're going to wrap up our panel, and please join me in thanking the panelists for their insights and your partnerships. It's really critical. Thank you so much. And am I introducing the social hour, or are you? Okay. Turn it back over to Kenny.
Thanks so much, Rita, and thanks to all our esteemed panelists here. No worries about that one. Yeah, so I think one of the real great takeaways from this conversation is the value of partnerships, which we see here with our tribal leaders, federal leaders in the crowd, also our state leaders. Shout out Catherine Ann Russo from the Florida Governor's Office. We see you joined us here. And really bridging the gap between science and policy making. So we have some of our 4 Everglades fellows in our nonprofit that are part of our nonprofit collaboration, who's also a big aspect of this. So we invite you to come up and engage at the wall and check out their posters about the research they're doing, and then feel free to join us out there for some refreshments. So thanks for coming, everyone.
We may be guiding the largest ecosystem restoration project in the world, sounding the wake-up call on a Category 6 hurricane, producing more tech diversity than Silicon Valley, and transforming one of the most important cities in the U.S. But FIU talent also knows that making a real impact on the big challenges we all face means entering the arena, being in the room where it happens, and leading our nation's research progress. So we're doubling down on the District of Columbia. We're here to provide diverse approaches to our federal research partners and in the halls of Congress, to convene our research collaborators from across the U.S. while creating engaging academic experiences for our students and bringing the magic of Miami to the nation's capital. FIU is a leader, redefining the American Research University, delivering on educational excellence, high social mobility, and high research impact. So join us and experience FIU.